Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Today, we are going to be overing the history of McDonnell Douglas, and the DC-10. So, I'm going to start off with the DC-10. Okay, so the DC-10 was a trijet introduced in the 1970s. The Douglas DC-10 was made by Douglas. It was a trijet that American Airlines asked McDonnell Douglas to make. American Airlines they reached out to McDonnell Douglas, or what was known as Douglas at that time. They said, hey, can you make a trijet that is as comfortable as a 747, but smaller and can take off from really short runways? So McDonnell Douglas said, okay, and then so they built that trijet. So once they had built that trijet, just 1 year after entering service, a cargo door blew off of an American Airlines flight, which it broke the floor. And so once it broke the floor, it severed controls. So, and then a couple of years later, Turkish Airlines Flight 981 happened, and so the cargo door blew off. The American Airlines DC-10 was actually able to safely land. So, the Turkish Airlines flight was not able to land, but its cargo door blew off. Now, the door had pins that when you shut it, the pins would lock into place. Now, sometimes it would be force shut, so it looked like it was closed, but it really wasn't. So, and then, just a couple of years later, then the FAA told McDonnell Douglas, hey, you need to revamp these doors as you've had way too many cargo door blowouts. So McDonnell Douglas says, okay, and they revamped the entire door, so people were like, okay, it's safe to fly on the DC-10 again. And then just later, American Airlines Flight 191 crashed right out of Chicago due to losing an engine. So, people were like, okay, it's not safe to fly on the DC-10 anymore. So, with that being said, all DC-10s in the United States were grounded straight for 5 weeks. So then later they figured out that it was American Airlines' fault due to improper maintenance, which led to the engine getting metal fatigue and falling off. Now, after that, there wasn't really a DC-10 crash. That was one of the deadliest ones, American Airlines Flight 191. It crashed just right out of Chicago. So, and then, I think more DC-10 crashes happened. Well, 10 years later, United Airlines Flight 232 had a back engine failure, lost control. It was trying to make an emergency landing, but it landed and then the plane started rolling, of course. So once the plane has rolled, it crashed. Now, it hit the back engine, and so that's where all the controls were on that specific DC-10, I believe, or on that variant. So that DC-10 ended up crashing. And so the smarties at McDonnell Douglas decided, okay, well, we're not going to need backup controls because it's not possible that all three can fail, right? Well, they ended up fixing that, definitely. So the DC-10 has maintained a safety record. Just after that, it's actually still in service today. I've caught one on flight radar for cargo, and it's used as a tanker that served during the California wildfires, I believe. So, now let's move on to the history of McDonnell Douglas and Douglas, stuff like that. So Douglas was an aircraft manufacturing company. They built planes like the DC-2, the DC-3, the DC-4, 5, 6, the DC-7, 8, 9, and so on. Now, one of the most DC-9 crashes that I'm familiar with has to be U.S. Air Flight 610, which crashed right out of Charlotte Douglas International Airport. it was U.S. Air, not U.S. Airways, but still, it was U.S. Air. So, basically, well, Douglas, they were known for their DC-10 crashes, because there were a lot of them in their early days of the DC-10. One of their biggest operators had to be United Airlines. So United Airlines was one of the more bigger operators of the DC-10. And so they built a DC-10 freighter, which are still in service today. One or more actually served for United Airlines cargo. Now, United Airlines cargo was a part of United Airlines. So Continental also had some DC-10s, which caused the crash of Air France Flight 4590. So when that happened, all Concords were grounded. That will be in a whole nother video. But the DC-10 was the cause of that, because a DC-10 actually lost a strip of metal on the ground, and so so the Concorde ended up hitting that, and then later crashed outside of that hotel. So, also, the DC-10 was known for tons of crashes. People did not feel safe flying on the DC-10 at all. So, the DC-10 has maintained a really safe safety record ever since then, of course. Because on its early days, it was like kind of bad-ish. So Douglas, they were really famous aircraft maker, mostly because of the DC-10, the 9, and the DC-8. The DC-10 was one of the reasons that they're most famous for. It was, I feel like, one of their most sold aircraft in their history. They sold a total of 351 DC-10s total. Now, the DC-9 could be more successful at one point in time. It could not be. I'm not really sure. But, so basically, then Douglas merged with McDonnell to make McDonnell Douglas. Now, McDonnell Douglas, they got the rights to, like the DC-2, the 3, the 4, the 5, the 6, the 7, onwards. They got the rights to those planes, like the DC-10, and they actually made the McDonnell Douglas MD-11 to rival the DC-10. And then you have the DC-10's other rival, the Lockheed L-10 Morphin TriStar, which will be a whole nother video. So, McDonnell Douglas, they made aircraft they made some regional jets, like the MD-80, the MD-81, MD-82, MD-83, MD-84, MD-85, MD-87, and so on. They also made the McDonnell Douglas MD-90, 91, 92, 93, 94, and onwards. I'm pretty sure. But the DC-10 was one of Douglas's most sold aircraft in their entire history. So once you have that, the McDonnell Douglas DC-10, yeah, let's just say it turned out to be really well, but it has maintained a safety record, and of course, American Airlines continued to operate their MD-80s, MD-90s, up until 2020 when they retired all their U.S. Airways aircraft, such as the MD-90, the A330, 767, and 757, which they got from U.S. Airways. But they did not retire the A320, A321, stuff like that. So, and then McDonnell Douglas merged with Boeing around the time that Boeing was working on their 777. And so that led to a little bit of Boeing's downfall. And then the 737 MAX happened, which was grounded because it had 2 crashes, Lion Air Flight 610 and Ethiopian Airlines Flight 302. So, and then now they're having production delays of the Boeing 787-9. Now, I believe some of this MCAS stuff might have been McDonnell Douglas. McDonnell Douglas was a really big aircraft producer, making jets such as the McDonnell Douglas F-4 Phantom, F-14, F-15, 16, and 18, and so on, of course. So they were a big company for the military industry, of course. They made tons of military aircraft. They made some commercial aircraft. One of their most known ones was the McDonnell Douglas MD-11, which, like the history of Douglas was actually kind of great for them in their early stages because the DC-3 really sold well. It was one of the planes that revolutionized air travel. So, like, the DC-8 was one of the first jets. It was built to rival the Boeing 707. And then you have the DC-10, which was meant to rival the McDonnell Douglas MD-11 and Lockheed TriStar. The DC-9 was probably built to rival some regional jets, maybe by Bombardier or something like that. So, that's at least what I'm getting at. That it was built to compete with other regional jets around the world. So then McDonnell Douglas merged, Douglas merged with McDonnell to form later known as McDonnell Douglas. So McDonnell Douglas, as I said, they made tons of military aircraft, commercial aircraft, like the MD series, like the MD-11, the MD-10, which is basically the DC-10, but it has MD now because McDonnell Douglas got the rights to Douglas. So, it later became the MD-10, not the Douglas DC-10, which the MD stands for McDonnell Douglas, if you did not know. So then, like, you have all of that combined, and you put that into Boeing. Now, Boeing did not make any of their aircraft that McDonnell Douglas ever made, at least I think. But American Airlines was one of the biggest operators of the Douglas DC-10. After all, they did ask Douglas to build the DC-10, basically. The not the DC, but the McDonnell Douglas MD-11 was more of like a it was more technology advanced than the DC-10. So you add that, and then you get a whole new plane. So the McDonnell Douglas MD-11 did have some crashes, of course. I'm not really sure about all of them. But Douglas, so Douglas merged with McDonnell Douglas merged with Boeing, and then so I feel like McDonnell Douglas has a part in creating Boeing's aircraft, or like naming them, creating them, you know what I mean. Like, for example, I'll take the Boeing 737 MAX. I feel like they had a part in creating that aircraft, you know, because the Boeing 737 MAX 8 is technologically advanced, and all of McDonnell Douglas's aircraft were technologically advanced. So, once you have that, you put 2 and 2 together, you have the Boeing 737 MAX. Take like the MD-11 and the 777, and you have the 737 MAX. You just built a technologically advanced aircraft. And that's exactly what McDonnell Douglas did, because they had all their fighters that really had some technology, and then their McDonnell Douglas MD-11, which was more technologically advanced than the Douglas DC-10. So, the DC-10 was not really a dangerous aircraft. Like, for example, American Airlines Flight 191 crashed to maintenance faults, and the crash of United 232 was because of a bird, and it severed its control failures in the back of the airplane. So you have that, and the cargo door blow off, such as American Airlines Flight 93, I believe. Let me know in the comments if I got that wrong. And Turkish Airlines Flight 981 were both caused by the airport ground workers. So you have that, and then none of those plane crashes were really McDonnell Douglas's fault, of course. But it came up the roof flipping car, because there's a flipping car coming. So you have that, and then now McDonnell Douglas maybe still makes some military planes. Oh my gosh, why are there so many cars? Our street is usually not this busy, as you saw earlier. So, you put two and two together, you have that, and then you put that and that together. You might make Boeing 737 MAX. You're talking technology advancement. Not really as technology advanced, maybe like the DC-10 or the DC-3. Something like that of some sort. So, that's where I'm going to end today's video. Bye, you guys.